LeBron James seems to always be breaking records at this point of his career. He's been in the NBA for a very, very long time, and he's been dominant in the NBA also for a very, very long time. Since LeBron has been a dominant player in the NBA for such a long time, probably more so than any player ever before, what comes with that is the fact that he's nearing the top of pretty much every major stat category. The most important stat of all is points. LeBron is currently third place on the all-time points list, and he will pass Kareem within the next 2 years, very likely, which will put him at the top of this list as the highest scorer in NBA history. Next, what of course comes with the territory of being the highest scorer in NBA history, is completing the most shots in league history as well. Since Kareem didn't really ever shoot three-pointers, it will take a little longer for LeBron to pass his record for all-time two-point field goals made, but he'll get there eventually, I think. Then for free throw completions, I actually don't think he'll top this list, as he needs about 2,000 more, but I think he'll at least crack the top 3 and pass Kobe by the end of his career. It's crazy to think that James Harden, who's played 6 less NBA seasons than LeBron, is actually pretty close to LeBron on this list. Moving on, I want to look at the all-time three-pointers made list, where LeBron is currently 11th place. LeBron isn't a terrible three-point shooter, but it's not a major part of his game, and never really was, considering when he entered the league, teams weren't even shooting half of the amount of three-pointers as they are today. By the end of his career, I would be surprised if he ever reached the number 5 spot in this list, where the great three-point shooter Kyle Korver currently is. Even if he does reach this mark, I wouldn't be surprised if he was back down out of the top 10 within 10 years. There's just so many three-pointers shot today that every inactive and current older player near the top of this list will be off of it in the near future. It is kind of a cooler thing to see though, because the records will continue to get crazier with this stat as the years go on. Now I want to go back to a list that LeBron is at the top of. However, it's not a list he should be proud to be the top of, and that's all-time turnovers. I don't think it's a surprise that LeBron's up there, as he's had the ball in his hands so much for such a long time that I think it should be expected. And he may actually lead this list for quite a long time as well, unless Russell Westbrook gets up there, as he's actually not too far down the list either. Looking at the all-time assist list, it's quite impressive what LeBron has accomplished there. However, if you know LeBron's game, it's kind of to be expected that he'd be up there. LeBron has always been a great passer, and it actually might be the best part of his game. Although he's been accused of passing the ball too much, which I personally don't really understand, I don't think anyone would say that getting an assist is a bad thing. Currently in the top 10 on this list, LeBron is less than 1,000 assists away from the number 4 spot, which I think he'll achieve in the next 2 seasons. That's as far as I think he'll get on this list though, as Chris Paul is an active player on this list, and he's still racking in many assists per game, and then John Stockton and Jason Kidd are just too far up there. Another part of his game that isn't talked about much is LeBron's defense. And although defense is something people argue that he's been shying away from as of recently, it wasn't always that way. When looking at the all-time steals list, we can see that LeBron is once again in a top spot, nearly in the top 10. I don't think LeBron will get much higher than 10th on this list, as even though he's only a few hundred away from many players, it just takes too long to get steals. Even if LeBron averaged 2 steals per game, which he's done once, and played every game in the season, he'd have to play about another 2.5 seasons to reach the top 5, so I don't think that's going to happen. The next stat we're going to look at is rebounding, which LeBron is pretty good at relative to his position. Getting to the top of this list, even as an elite center in today's game, is virtually impossible. I'll say it right now, Wilt Chamberlain will never be knocked off the number 1 spot, as he averaged 23 rebounds a game throughout his entire career. Further down from that, the stat is filled with legends who are true centers that stayed in the post all game and never really dribbled the ball or shot three-pointers. For the all-time rebounding list, LeBron is nearing the top 40, which I think is incredibly impressive, and I think if he stays in the NBA for another 3 seasons, he can legitimately crack the top 25, which would be a huge achievement, putting him in front of big man legends such as Patrick Ewing, Dirk Nowitzki, and Pau Gasol. Another big man stat is blocks, which is another statistic where the leader may never be dethroned, as Hakeem Olajuwon averaged 3.1 blocks per game for his long 18-year career. And to put that into perspective, there's only been 3 times in the past 10 years where a player has averaged over 3.1 blocks per game in a single season. This is a list that LeBron is understandably a little further down at around the 100th spot. Considering that LeBron has averaged less than a block per game in his career, I think that maybe he could crack the top 60 if he played another 3 seasons, which again, I don't think is bad at all. We're nearing the end of the major stat categories, and next I want to go back to a stat where LeBron could possibly take the throne in the near future, and that's all-time games played. LeBron is nearing the 14th place on this list, and this stat is the most predictable because you can only go one game at a time. Looking at Robert Parrish in the number 1 spot with 1,611 games played, it looks like LeBron would have to play another 4 NBA seasons to reach this mark, and then play like 60 games each of those years instead of all 82. I don't know if this is going to happen for LeBron, as it's really all up to him. However, I do think it's clear that LeBron is going to crack the top 10 and probably the top 5 by the time he's done. And if he really wants to, he can be the number 1 person on this list by the end of his career. A stat that's like a games played is minutes played, but it has more of an emphasis on contribution to the game, as it truly shows how much a player has been on the court. LeBron is nearly in the top 3 for this stat, and I can pretty much guarantee he'll break Kareem's record if he plays another 3 NBA seasons. The final stat I want to bring up is fouls, as it's a stat that isn't really ever talked about. Like turnovers, it's not a stat that a player wants to be leading in, and for LeBron, considering how many games he's played, he's done a very good job at avoiding being near the top of this list, as he's slowly making his way towards 200th place all time. I think in another 3 seasons, it would be possible for LeBron to reach the 125th mark on this list, where Michael Jordan currently is, and possibly if he's really aggressive, he could crack the top 100. So that's it for the major stat categories that LeBron is getting near the top of through his career so far. Which one of these do you think is the most interesting? Do you think I'm wrong in my predictions? Let me know what you think below, and remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Thanks for watching.